Are you interested in buying yourself some cute aesthetic merch? Go click the link in my description box now. And get some awesome discounts from 15% up to 50% off. In our shop you can get some cute hat, hoodie, and bottom. They offer you free worldwide shipping on orders over $39.90. So, what are you waiting for? Link in the description.
Why don't you say so? They watch my moves, yeah, do my dance. I'm a skinny little bitch, still shaking ass. And ain't shit free, niggas show me cash. Fuck a broke boy, I been had a bag. I come in first place, I never been last. A bitch act stupid, bitch get trashed. A bag, I come in first place, I never been last. A bitch act stupid, bitch get trashed.
Imagine being kidnapped and convincing your kidnapper to hand you back your phone. On September 4th, 2017, in Carlton, Georgia, 21-year-old Jada Gladden went to her local Kroger to get some tea and medicine because she wasn't feeling very well. As she was walking back to her car, a man named Timothy Wilson approached her and asked her if she had a lighter. Jayla told the man that she didn't have a lighter and continued on her way to her car. As Jayla arrived to her car, she felt a sudden stab in her stomach region. When she looked down, she noticed there was a knife pointed at her, and behind her was this man. Timothy made her get into the car and had her climb over to the passenger seat. He then started to drive while still holding the knife against Jayla. After a while of driving, he stopped the vehicle around a church parking lot. Trigger warning, SA. He had Jayla remove all her clothing and then forced himself on her and her over an hour and sodomized her. He then drove them to a park where he had her sit next to him as his arm was around her, explaining to her how easy it would be for him to kill her and to bury her somewhere in the park. After a while of being at the park, they got into the vehicle, and this is where Timothy told Jayla that he was going to rob a gas station because he needed money. Jayla calmed herself down and started having a conversation with Timothy. Timothy had asked her how to get to Atlanta, and he had also disclosed the fact that he had been in prison for a very long time, had just gotten out. This is when Jayla thought to herself that if he's been in prison for a very long time, that he doesn't really know how technology works. So she offered to show him how to get there by using her phone. He ended up believing her and allowed her to navigate him using her actual phone. This is when Jayla turned down the brightness to her phone so that her kidnapper could not see what was going on, and texted her boyfriend Tamir by texting him her location. Here are the text messages. I'll move real quick so you can screenshot it. He ended up asking, "Where are you at?" She said, "Kidnapped." He said, "Stop playing." She said, "In God." And then he decided to go to the authorities. Jayla texted him back notifying that she was scared. He had a knife. They were in her car, and not to have the police, if they do show up with the lights, because then he's going to end up killing her. At this point, authorities are tracking where Jayla is, tracking the vehicle that they're driving, and they're aware that he's trying to rob a station. Having no idea what's going on, he ends up taking the phone away from Jayla and then puts her in the trunk. Police officers around the area were notified about the car they were looking for, and there was one officer who was locally there, spotted Jayla and her perpetrator, and parked in the highway with his lights off. Timothy still noticed the officer and sped for the exit, but ended up colliding with 4 other cars. Using this as an opportunity, Jayla got out of the vehicle and went straight to the authorities and was led to safety. Timothy made a run for it, but was eventually captured. Turns out that Timothy had been in and out of prison since he was 13 years old. Timothy was charged and sentenced to life. And let's not forget, Jayla's a true badass.
It's just a cigarette, and it cannot be that bad.
Honey, don't you love me, and you know it makes me sad.
You probably think this world is a dream come true, but you're wrong.
Aiden Fucci looks around aimlessly, appearing to be confused during court on Wednesday.
What's that going on? Why am I here? I just want to talk to my mom and dad. What's going on? What's going on?
He rocks back and forth and mumbles about demons.
What's got going on? I don't let you demons. I don't let you demons take my soul. You demons want to take my soul away. I don't let you demons steal my soul.
Let's talk about the Burari deaths. On July 1st, 2018, the bodies of 11 family members spanning 3 generations were found by the police. They were found hanging and gagged with limbs bound. What was first suspected to be a mass murder was later discovered to be an occult ritual gone wrong. The Chundawat family, also known as the Bhatia family by neighbors, lived in a 2-story house in the Burari Sant Nagar neighborhood for around 20 years after leaving their hometown in Rajasthan. On the same morning that the bodies were discovered at 7:15 a.m., one of the neighbors, Guru Charan Singh, noticed that Lalit Chundawat hadn't joined him for their daily morning walk. He also noticed that the family's shop hadn't opened at the usual time. Guru Charan decided to visit the house, and the scene that met his eyes caused him to call the police. The bodies of all 11 family members were found hanging from the ceiling as if they were hanging from a banyan tree. As to be expected, this became a very high-profile case, and the police officials found themselves under quite a bit of stress. Many theories began to make their way around. The family was extremely well loved by the neighbors, so what could have possibly gone wrong? The crime branch was involved, but people began to question the authority of the police when it came to maintaining law and order. Political parties took advantage of the situation to incite people to further their agenda. While all this was going on, the investigating officers made a key find. They discovered 11 diaries in the house that contained some cryptic messages. These messages were written angrily, as if by someone else. This was no longer considered to be a case of murder or suicide. Instead, they were looking at a case of accidental death. As it turned out, this case revolved around black magic, mental health, and toxic and regressive culture. Lalit Chundawat was the youngest of the siblings, but was considered the head of the house and controlled many things. He sustained a head injury and endured a traumatic experience in the past. After his father, Bhopal Singh, passed away, Lalit was diagnosed with PTSD. He didn't speak for a year after this, and people thought he lost his voice. He told family members that he saw his father in his dreams. He claimed that his father told him that if he did a specific prayer at a particular time, that his voice would return. Lalit's voice returned, and his family members put blind faith in his claims. They believed he was able to see his father. This marked the beginning of the psychotic disorder that would be shared by the family. Around 2007, Lalit began to show signs of schizophrenia. He told his family that he was possessed and his father was trying to talk to them. The family's finances grew after listening to Lalit's advice. This not only influenced Lalit's siblings, but the younger generation too. This continued for 11 years, unnoticed by anyone in the neighborhood. This intrigued psychiatrists as well, who were curious as to the fact that even a 15-year-old child in the family believed everything Lalit said to be true without question. Part 2 of the Burari deaths. Lalit convinced the family that one final ritual was necessary. He told them that they had to hang themselves in a specific manner, a message that was once again relayed to him by his deceased father. This is where the diaries came back into play. The angrily written messages opened up a theory that this was perhaps an offering to the spirit of Lalit's father. It's thought that every family member believed they'd survive the hanging and that Lalit's father would come to their rescue. At the crime scene, investigators found traces of a religious ritual that had taken place the night before. Then strange coincidences began to emerge. 11 pipes were found protruding from the house wall. 7 of the pipes were facing downward, which was the same number of women who had died. 4 of the pipes were facing outward, and this was the same number of men who had died. The pipes were also organized in the same sequence as the bodies were found. Many claim the pipes were placed there to allow the spirits to be released. Some theories also focused heavily on the number 11 and that there was something sinister attached to it. A few other theories have spawned regarding what triggered Lalit to perform this ritual. One of the theories is that Lalit's niece was engaged and he was worried that she would spill his secret once she left the home. This made Lalit have the family commit the act. Others believe that Lalit truly thought that his family would come out of this alive and that they would attain some form of spiritual enlightenment. Regardless, the fact remains that in India, mental health needs to be taken seriously and addressed as soon as possible. Toxic masculinity and extreme viewpoints take precedence over mental health, and this is completely unacceptable. Mental health should be talked about, normalized, and care should never take a back seat.
All right, true crime fans, have you heard the update about Madeline McCann? If not, follow along. The prosecutor in the case is saying they are 100% convinced that suspect Christian B abducted and murdered her. But what they're not saying is why they are 100% convinced. So come with me on a little journey. Now, I have a podcast called True Crime and Cocktails, and we covered the Madeline McCann case with an episode that aired on March 30th of this year. Now, in this episode, my co-hostess with the mostest, Christy Oxborough, who is an amazing researcher, she told me all about Christian B, who is a suspect I had never heard about. So if you re-listen to that episode, there is some pretty stunning information given what we know now in October 2021. Take a listen to this. Actually, first, couple things. First of all, trigger warning. If you're not into this kind of thing, scroll away now. Number two, Christian Bruckner is his name. German authorities give suspects anonymity. That's why they call him Christian B. He has done so many horrific things. He's currently in prison for assaulting a 72-year-old woman. They have found images of him with children, hundreds of images. So just keep all of that in mind. He also has multiple locations. He was living in a camper van in the area that Madeline McCann went missing at the time she went missing. His cell phone also pinged an hour before she went missing in the area of her hotel. So anyway, but here are the parts of the podcast I want you to hear.
July 2020, German police searched a garden plot in Hanover, Germany, once owned by Bruckner. You know what the police didn't check, though? Bruckner's second allotment that he owned in Germany. In September 2013, Bruckner leased a second allotment in Germany. According to the owner, the previous tenant before Bruckner had begun to dig a basement. But since basements are not permitted in that area, Bruckner was told he'd have to fill it in. So the guy who owns the land watched Bruckner bring in his camper and various materials. And, well, yeah, when he moved out, the basement was filled in. But that has never once been looked at all. Get in that basement. Like the guy who owns the building, he was asked, like, have the police come in here? And he's like, nope. Probably should.
So again, we covered that episode that all aired in March of this year. It wasn't until mid-August of this year that they did search that house in Germany. What did they find? A dungeon. They literally found a dungeon. So they finally searched it in August, and now in October they're saying they're 100% sure. Says to me there's probably some unrefutable evidence that they found in that dungeon. And all I'm saying is, we told you this in March!
There's breaking news in the true crime community. Authorities believe they have officially identified the Zodiac killer. If you don't know, the Zodiac is one of America's most prolific serial murderers who terrorized San Francisco in the late 1960s. He would taunt authorities with complex riddles and codes that were sent to newspapers and police. The man investigators have identified as the Zodiac killer is Gary Francis Post. The Casebreakers, which is a team of more than 40 detectives, journalists, and military intelligence, made this breakthrough by linking the Zodiac killer to a murder hundreds of miles away that was never previously connected to him. Gary passed away in 2018, but authorities uncovered new forensic evidence and photos from Gary's darkroom, including an image that shows a scar on his forehead that matches a scar on the sketch of the Zodiac. Authorities were also able to decipher letters sent by the Zodiac that revealed Gary as the killer. In one note, the letters of Gary's full name were removed to reveal an alternate message. The Zodiac killer was linked to the murder of 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates. She was found dead in an alleyway of the Riverside City College campus in Riverside, California on October 31st, 1966. This occurred 2 years before the first killing that was linked to the Zodiac killer. This is a 1975 memo from the FBI that states Sherry was, in fact, the Zodiac's sixth victim. A lot of evidence links Gary to her murder. Gary was an Air Force veteran and at the time of Sherry's murder was receiving medical treatment for a gun incident at a hospital located just 15 minutes away from where Sherry was found dead. A wristwatch with paint splatter on it was found at the scene and was thought to have been worn by the killer. This lines up with the fact that Gary painted homes for more than 4 decades. Police also found a heel print from a military-style boot at the crime scene, which matched the same style and size of those found in other Zodiac crime scenes and those of Gary's. Neighbors and other witnesses have come forward describing Gary as controlling, violent at times, and abusive towards his wife. Authorities have tried reaching out to Gary's remaining family members, but have been unsuccessful. The Zodiac has been connected to 5 murders, but is claimed to have killed 37 people. This is all of the evidence that they have released so far. It'll be interesting to see what else comes of this.
Andrew Cunanan was the youngest of 4, born in California in 1969. Friends of his at a very young age remembered him as being very bright and ultimately very smart. He actually memorized the encyclopedia. His brother even stated that you could pick up any volume of the encyclopedia and just ask Andrew any question and he would know the answer, tested with an IQ of 147. However, as a teenager, he started to lie quite a bit, and in turn became just a prolific liar. He did eventually come out as gay in high school, and sought out sugar daddies who would just pay him monthly wages. At the age of 19, his father actually fled the United States to avoid embezzlement. His mother was very upset that he was gay, and they would get into arguments quite frequently. Things would actually get very physical. He even threw her up against the wall at one point, dislocating her shoulder. After his death, they were doing examinations, and they thought that he lacked empathy and remorse almost entirely. Eventually, in 1989, he did move to San Francisco with some friends. It was believed during this time he was creating what is quoted as violent pornography. He was dealing things like opioids and cocaine. So allegedly, in 1990, he met Gianni Versace in San Francisco. Allegedly. Versace's family denies this entirely, among other people.
I'd just like to address something that was brought up earlier in the program, the insinuation that Gianni might have known the suspect. I don't believe for 1 second that there could be any ounce of truth in that. Gianni was a devoted family man and had had a deep and very committed relationship to his companion Antonio for many, many years.
Despite this, Andrew swore that the two were friends and that they knew each other. At the time, he was still being financially supported by older, rich, wealthy men, some of them just giving him cars and like $2,000 monthly allowance. Andrew would then max out their credit cards. And this is when he started to get into some heavier drugs, and he was doing meth and selling it. By 1997, his friends were saying that he was drinking all the time and abusing painkillers. April 27, 1997, Andrew Cunanan drove to Minneapolis to go see an old friend, Jeffrey Trail. Once Andrew Cunanan got there, him and Jeffrey Trail had a pretty big argument, to which then Andrew Cunanan stole his gun, and then went to the house of David Madsen here. He called Trail and told him to come get his gun, and then once Trail got there, Cunanan beat Trail to death in front of Madsen. At this point, investigators believed that Madsen and Cunanan left the scene, and then on April 29th, once Madsen's coworkers hadn't heard from him and he hadn't showed up to work, they went to his apartment to go investigate, and that's when they found Trail. He was wrapped up in a carpet and placed behind Madsen's couch. And at this point, Madsen's family believed that he was being held hostage by Cunanan, which makes sense. And on May 3rd, Madsen's body was found, also with a gunshot wound to the head, in Rush City, Minnesota. Andrew Cunanan then drove to Chicago, Illinois. And that's when he randomly, or what seemed to be randomly, killed 72-year-old Lee Miglin, who was a real estate developer while his wife was away. Officials said that this was a crime of opportunity and that Miglin was possibly cleaning something in his garage since that's where he was found dead. But some believe otherwise, and that the two might have known each other. After brutally murdering Miglin, Cunanan actually went to his house, ate a sandwich, and cleaned himself up and shaved. And even took a nap. Investigators noticed that Lee Miglin's car was missing. And this is when they found Madsen's red Jeep at the scene instead. So Cunanan was just stealing cars and going to a different city. Because of Miglin's Lexus having a car phone, they saw that it was activated May 4th, 1997 in Pennsylvania. And investigators were able to monitor the activity. May 9th, he traveled to New Jersey, where he shot and killed 45-year-old William Reese. Investigators believe that he killed him just to take his car, because Cunanan probably believed at this point that the Lexus was being searched. Then he used Reese's truck to then drive to Florida. So after the murder of Reese and now Cunanan's fourth murder, he was the 449th person added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. I did a series on the current top 10. If you'd like to check that out, go to my profile. So Cunanan was actually in Miami Beach, Florida area for about 2 months, staying at a hotel for about $29 a night, paying in cash. This was about 4 miles north of the Versace mansion. Cunanan was changing the way he looked. He was wearing wigs. He was altering his name and appearance. And then around 8:45 a.m. on July 15th, 1997, Andrew Cunanan walked up to Gianni Versace on his front steps and shot him in the back of the head. There have been many theories on exactly why this happened or what his motive was, but it's still uncertain. Police were then actually able to locate Reese's stolen vehicle in a nearby parking garage, which had a lot of Cunanan's clothes in it and actually newspaper clippings and articles about him. And then on July 23rd, 1997, on a luxury houseboat in Miami Beach, they found Andrew Cunanan's body, and he had unalived himself. Same gun used to kill Madsen, Reese, and Versace. There were rumors going around that maybe he did this and then unalived himself because he discovered that he was HIV positive. However, his autopsy revealed that he was negative. Could have been another one of his lies that he was spreading, I'm not sure. So Gianni Versace actually bought the mansion that he was living in at the time in 1992 and spent $33 million on improvements and renovations. The family sold it after his death in 2000. It is now a very nice luxury hotel and villa. The rooms are quite beautiful and expensive. At the time of his death, Gianni Versace's empire was valued over $800 million. He still had 130 boutiques around the world, and his legacy will live on. If there are any more updates about the recent 2 men unaliving themselves in the hotel, I will keep you updated. Follow for more true crime and oddities.
A murder victim that predicted her own death? From a very young age, Kathy Hobbs knew that she wasn't going to live past 16. Kathy Hobbs didn't have an easy life growing up. Her parents divorced when she was 8, and it was very messy. She was super close to her dad, so it was especially hard on her. On top of that, a friend died of a heart condition in middle school. And through this whole time, her whole life, Kathy talked about having premonitions or feelings that she wouldn't live past 16. When her and her family moved to a residential apartment complex in Las Vegas, Kathy's mind seemed to ease a little bit. She made a lot of friends, and it wasn't until her 16th birthday that things got a little weird. She developed a little bit of agoraphobia and refused to leave her house. She knew that her time was coming. But when her 16th birthday came and passed, she really thought that the curse was broken and she was going to live. For the next few weeks, she felt pretty normal. She went out, she made friends, she was hanging out, going to parties, acting like a regular teenager. She even wanted to become a beautician and open up her own salon. But then, on July 23rd, 1987, Kathy left her house to go buy another book from the supermarket. She was never seen again. Here's where it gets strange though. Vivian Hobbs, Kathy's mom, woke up that night around 3 a.m., feeling like someone had bashed her over the head. She couldn't shake the feeling. Eventually it subsided and she thought it was done and went back to sleep. The next morning she woke up, went into Kathy's room, and found she was gone. In fear that Kathy was abducted, she called the police. There was evidence that Kathy made it to the supermarket and left with a book at 11:17 p.m. But what happened after that? No one would know until 9 days later, when a geologist looking for crystals found her body. It was lying in a remote field near Lake Mead, an hour's drive from Las Vegas. She had died around 3 a.m. when Vivian woke up from repeated blows to her head. Think about that for a second. Looks like the premonitions run in the family. She also had been essayed. Her family found letters that she had written to them just months before her birthday, and it talked about how much she loved them and how much she would miss them because, let's face it, Kathy's premonitions were almost accurate. To a T. It was crazy. Part 2 going up right away.